The dog was too big. It cleared the guardrail in one hop, landed square in the beams, and lifted a head level with the vehicle's hood. Yellow eyes found her. Flat, focused, and held while it crossed. Story 1. Morgan worked where the country asked her to. A travel paramedic moving city to city, week to week. New hotels, new stations, new roads to memorize at 3 a.m. Pennsylvania kept finding her that first year. Mountain switchbacks, narrow farm lanes, long stretches with no streetlights. The dark here, however, was not empty. On nights off, she drove to keep her head even. A loop through central counties where the hedgerow got close enough to scuff the paint if you drifted. On this particular night, the lane shoulder fell away into a steep cut. Guardrail on the left, trees beyond. Nobody behind, nobody ahead, just the beam spread, the white lines, the thought that if she kept the wheels where they belonged, the world would stay in one piece. Movement. A dark shape leaping the rail with the ease of a small deer, but somehow wrong. Too deliberate. It dropped into the lane. And the first thing her brain did was measure. Hood height on her truck, 6 feet off the ground. This thing's head, on all fours, met that line clean. Fur like a husky in winter, thick and grey, but the body read longer, leaner, like coyote lines scaled up and then muscled. It didn't flinch at the lights. It looked straight through the glass at the person holding the wheel. Yellow eyes, sharp, not glow reflective, not glass marble shine, locked and tracking. 3 strides, unhurried, over the center line, off into the trees. Morgan's foot had found the brake without the jolt. Hands stayed where training put them. Steady, don't swerve, don't chase a problem into the ditch. The truck rolled down to a crawl. The red hazard triangle clicked on the dash. She waited for the second thing. There wasn't one. No crash from the brush, no panting, no twig snap. Just the road again. Sleep broke in half that week. The picture of those eyes was the seam. During work calls, Morgan was fine. Off shift, her head replayed the measuring. 6 feet, level with the hood of the vehicle. She tried to flatten it with reason. Big dog off a rural property. But the angle was all wrong. Memory being memory, but reason couldn't shrink the elevation. Weeks later, a different end of the state, a hotel wedged into a new-built business park outside Philly. The lot was a wash of light, the edges unfinished, dark trees holding a line. Morgan kept the blinds up at night to cue her brain. Sun up, sleep. Moon up, wake. She'd always done better when she could see the world move. She was on the bed, shoes off, a show running with the sound low, when a shape took over the bottom third of the window. White, featureless from this distance under that light. No face, no joints. More like a thick, pale body with short legs underneath. It moved with purpose across the far end of the lot. an odd, compact gait that didn't match any person or dog she'd ever seen. Morgan blinked hard, once to check for screen glare, once for eyelid dryness. The second look met empty asphalt. The shape was gone, cleanly, not behind a car, not under a stairwell. Gone like a jump cut. She did the scan, left to right, top to bottom. Nothing. A few nights later, same room, blinds up, the hour that makes you count to sleep. The sound arrived from nowhere specific, the way wind can carry a single note clean and set it down beside you. It was a baby's cry if a baby could cry through cloth and dust. Raspy, small, human-shaped but not human enough to sit right in the ear. It came in a long, thinning line, like someone dragging it away while it made itself heard. Morgan muted the TV. The sound faded into distance and was gone. Silence. Then again, closer. The second cry rubbed itself raw on the same edges. The third call came and faded. She moved to the window and looked down. Lot lights, cars, the rectangle of mulch cut for eventual bushes. No movement, no stroller, no couple, no prank. Not even a fox roaming the parking lot. And the wind. There wasn't enough of it to move the hotel's flag. She thought about going outside. It became a step-by-step in the head. Grab the keycard, ride down alone. Night air meets skin. The elevator chimed and stopped at her floor without being called. Someone got out and walked, and the sound made her ribs feel too narrow. The part of her that ran toward voices on bad nights stayed in the room. In the dark glass, her reflection stood on top of the lot like a ghost. The white blob from 2 nights ago moved in the space memory keeps for a thing when you've only seen it wrong. Blank where a face should be, legs too short, the gait too sure. Then the memory of her encounter on the road. Head at hood height. Eyes that didn't flare when light hit them. She pulled the blinds down halfway, not closed, never closed. You had to see something to know it was there, but enough that the lot stopped being a stage. She texted, nobody in particular, what she was thinking. She typed and erased versions that sounded reasonable. Coyotes can look big in the light, and weird kid prank. Some other speaker? She left the messages unsent. She searched for stories against her better judgment. Threads about night things in Pennsylvania. Scrubbed news items with quotes from neighbors who heard something like a baby, but not. Each explanation solved one corner and left 3 open. She mapped the lot. The sight lines told her what the body already knew. If it had been a person, the person would have been somewhere. If it had been a prank, the gear would have been visible. And then the sound. On the 3rd night after the cries, the brain did the thing brains do when they can't file a threat. It taught her body a new habit. She made a rule about windows she could break if she needed to. She made rules about parking under lights. She made so many rules that the walk from the lobby to the truck became a checklist instead of a distance. She tried telling a coworker in a way a coworker could accept. Odd wildlife near the hotel last night, something that sounded like a kid. The look she got was kind, but set in the place where the world keeps normal. Foxes, the coworker said. And that was a sensible sentence. Morgan nodded and put the full thing back in the box it came in. Story 2. He heard it before he understood it. Footsteps moving on dead leaves. Quick, two-legged, coming fast. Then the sound that turned his blood. A bright plastic squeak, short and eager, like a toy meant to invite a dog. In the dark, he stopped breathing, and the thing changed direction without slowing. Alex walked at night because night was the only hour that didn't argue with him. He struggled with insomnia. The town was quiet at midnight, street lights on wet pavement, distant road noise, the low hum of a distant train. Past the houses, the park opened up. Along one edge, a thin line of trees separated the grass from a triangle of bramble and elder. Local kids called it a copse, but it was really a narrow pocket of shade with just enough depth you couldn't see straight through. Close enough to houses that a scream might carry, close enough to feel brave about stepping in. This particular night, he wasn't counting his steps. He cut into the trees to cool the frantic hum under his skin, found a trunk with flaking bark, and slid down until the earth held him. It smelled of damp leaves and old wood. Sitting there, he let his gaze go soft. The phone in his hand pulsed the time, 2:28. And then he switched the screen off because the backlight felt invasive. He listened to small noises, a drip, a thread of wind, a tiny tick a beetle makes moving under debris. Empty, patient sounds. The first steps were cautious, somewhere ahead and to his left, 30 feet maybe. Dry leaves yielding and then springing back. Not a scuffle, not a scurry, a stride. A human stride. He lifted his head, and his hands already knew what to do. Thumb looking for the phone button he'd just denied himself. Don't. If someone saw the light, they'd see him. Alex held still, listened. 2, 3, 4 careful steps. There should have been small snaps. The forest floor was cross-hatched with twigs he'd felt digging into his ankles on the way in. But whoever was walking didn't break anything. Not one thin stick parted with a crack. Leaves whispered. Twigs stayed silent. Too light, he thought. A kid? But the timing was wrong for a kid. And the spacing of the steps was adult. An adult with weight that didn't quite land. Then the squeak. Not an animal's thin distress. A deliberate, cheerful squeeze of a pet's toy. Once, again, twice in odd rhythm. The hair along his arms lifted. A small old reflex. No voice followed it. No here or whistle to command a dog. Only the squeak and those frictionless steps. Alex pinched the phone dark completely, slid it under his thigh as if light could leak from the glass. His breath shortened itself without asking permission. He tried to tell his body a story. Someone's lost a dog. Someone is playing with a dog. Someone is drunk and being stupid. But the story snagged on ground's impossibility. Stickless steps. Then the thing began to sprint. It sounded like a burst that crossed angles without choosing one. Alex imagined a human trying to run hard on marbles. There was no path there, only nettle and snag. And yet it veered as if nothing snagged it. Then it stopped. 2 slow steps. Squeak. A pause. Squeak, squeak. Then the sprint again, blasting through air in the wrong direction before cutting back. Each pause lasted as long as it took his pulse to pound twice. Then the bright, ridiculous toy note would pop in the dark like someone squeezing a joke into the middle of a horror scene. He wanted to stand, to put a trunk at his back and make his body big. He wanted to run for the field. But when he pictured standing, he pictured the squeak right behind him. So he froze. The cost was breath. He took it away from himself and saved it. It was nearer now. He placed it at 15 or 12 feet away, the way you can place a voice across a room. A sprint, then a tack, a pause, 2 steps, squeak. The pattern seemed to be testing him. When it paused, he could hear the small, separate sounds of leaves uncrumpling under pressure that couldn't break the sticks underneath. There was a moment when his fear tilted toward anger. Say something, he told himself. "Who's there?" said in a voice that made him feel like a person again. He wet his lips. The dark was total. His eyes were useless. He felt the words lift in his throat, and then it came for him. It ran past him at a speed that didn't belong in trees. No crack, no branch protested, just the hard drum of leaves and the suggestion of a body. Wind pulled off a moving thing, licking the skin above his shoulder. The squeak was at his ear as it went by. For a second, he knew the exact height of it without seeing it. Chest high to him, whatever that meant. Not small, not huge. Present. And then it was gone. Footsteps racing away into the black. A final staccato squeeze offered over its retreat like a wave. He counted. He never remembered deciding to count, but later he could recite the numbers. 5 heartbeats to the pause. 2 slow steps. 1 squeak. 12 fast strides to silence. He stood, with and without his legs, the way you do when the animal part of you refuses the command and the human overrules it. The field was a great soft square to the right, the park lamps thin and far. He left the trees not with a sprint, but with obedience. He didn't look behind. Looking might cause his imagination to see things that aren't there. The grass took him like a pool takes a stone, and then he was on tarmac, and houses were houses again, and windows were windows, and he could decide to live in the world where nothing he had just experienced had happened. He walked home down streets with sleeping cars and curtains drawn. A fox darted across once, a loose shadow with a tail. The fox made fox noises, claws on grit, quick breath. He appreciated the familiar sounds bringing him back to a sense of normalcy. At his front door, his hands shook enough that the key scraped twice before it found the lock. Sleep didn't come that night. The next night, he felt dumb and superstitious carrying his fear around, so he made rules. No going into the trees after midnight, no sitting. Keep to the path where lampposts could witness you. He lasted 2 nights before the insomnia bullied him back into motion. He went toward the field and stopped at the grass. The park and its black scene waited. He stood and listened. If nothing happened, maybe things would be normal again. His body said otherwise. He searched for stories. He scrolled through a map app until the green of the park became generic green and the tiny satellite blur of trees became any trees anywhere and therefore harmless. A middle step in his fixing was to ask other people. He crafted the question to make it reasonable. Weird animal noise in the park, kind of like a squeaky dog toy. He sent it to a friend who walked his Labrador at odd hours and to a neighbour who fed the birds. The answers were sensible and wrong. Probably a fox. Maybe a deer. Could be kids mucking about. Each sensible answer pushed the night further into the classroom of explanations, and for a few minutes he felt better. And then the feeling receded, and the memory reasserted itself. The 3rd night after, he woke from his usual state of non-sleep. His curtains breathed the vertical breath of houses in old wind. He listened for nothing, which is another way of listening for everything. The house answered with pipes and a refrigerator tick and a car door coughing half a street away. Reasonable sounds. He told himself to count breaths. At breath 12, the memory handed him a gift. The exact feel of air as the step went past him. Not breath, but pressure. He sat up because lying down surrendered the field to it. He turned his phone face down because the sight of a number beginning with 2, 3 felt like an invitation. He laughed at that come morning. On the 5th day, he went back in daylight and forced his shoes into the leaves at the very edge. He picked 2 twigs, the length and thickness of matches, and broke them with gentle pressure. They snapped so easily that he flinched from the sound. He crouched and tried to mimic the step he'd heard that night. Heel-toe, then toe-heel, then flat, distributing weight like a careful thief. Each attempt was louder than the memory, clumsier. He stopped because a man walking a spaniel came near, and the shame joined fear. He didn't want to explain this to a stranger's face. That night, the sound changed in his head. It was still a toy squeak. It was still friendly and stupid and bright. But it had been wielded like a tool. Not a noise that happened to happen. Squeak to announce. Squeak to draw attention. Squeak to measure him. The footsteps had learned him in the dark, stopping to let him hear, sprinting to test, pausing to make a noise a person would understand. He tried to walk his thought away from that verb and failed. Learned. He pictured talking to someone about it honestly. He pictured the face they'd make. He pictured the word fox coming out of their mouth with kind eyes. He chose silence, because silence let the world continue. On the 7th night after, his phone woke him with a tap he hadn't set. He rolled over and saw the lock screen waiting with nothing on it, as if he'd dreamt the haptic. He blinked at the time. 2:34. And then noticed the health app tile on the home screen adding a thin bar to the day. Steps. 12 between 2:33 and 2:34. Recorded while his phone lay on the bedside table and he lay still beside it, counting breaths he would later forget. He told himself the accelerometer had twitched at a passing truck. He told himself a lot of things. He turned the phone face down and watched the dark rectangle until morning. Story 3. The smell hit first. Blood. Not a hint. The whole path turned metallic and thick, as if the trees were breathing iron. They weren't in a deep forest, just the cut-through from the car park to the park. A strip of trees broad enough that the grass and streetlights fell away. Jules walked beside Nina, trading small talk. A few lamps back near the cars. Ahead, the footpath went darker between trunks. You could hear the road if you listened. You could still decide you weren't alone. Nina flinched. Mosquito on me. Jules saw it land on her wrist and slapped it out of habit, quick and clean. That was when the air changed. The smell of blood rose up around them, sharp and copper, everywhere at once. Not a drop, a presence. Nina slowed. Do you smell? Yeah. Jules didn't want to name it. Naming it would make it real. All sounds shuttered. The wind stopped without tapering, as if someone had switched it off. Birds clamped their calls mid-syllable. Then they saw it. It drifted into their path, small enough to sit on a fingertip, shaped like a person. 2 arms, 2 legs, 3 thin wings fanned behind, tan and papery like dried seed husks. It didn't flap. It slid on the air. A neat, gliding line that made no noise Jules could hear. Its skin matched the wings, tan, smooth, featureless. No eyes, no mouth, no marks. It passed them at thigh height as if they didn't exist. 10 seconds becomes a long time when the world refuses to make a sound. Jules held her breath without meaning to. The little figure glided, turned a fraction, then corrected, like a leaf catching an invisible current. Felt deliberate, not random. It felt uninterested in them in a way that didn't comfort. Jules tried to track it against a trunk to mark its size. Pinky length, no more. The mind kept wanting to scale it up to something explainable. A bat, a moth, a trick of distance. And the eyes wouldn't agree. The smell held steady, heavy, wet, too much, and then faded at the exact pace the thing drifted by. Don't move, Jules said, whispering because silence asked you to. Nina nodded, jaw tight. The creature, if that's what it was, passed the line of a low branch. For a heartbeat, it crossed in front of the dark bark and became clear. Then it wasn't there. No burst of speed, no drop, as if the space that carried it closed and took it with it. The first noise back was a single leaf turning, then a far bird, then the usual mosquito whine as if the night had been paused and someone pressed play. Jules let her shoulders down, and only then noticed how high they'd climbed. Nina spoke first, voice thin. "You saw it?" "Yeah." "What was it?" Jules swallowed. The taste of copper clung to the back of the tongue. "I don't know." They stood and watched nothing for a while. The path ahead looked like any path. They walked on without quite deciding to. Every few steps, Jules's eyes flicked to the edge of her vision. The buzz of mosquitoes returned in honest waves and died back and returned again like normal. When the path gave them back the park lights, both exhaled at the same time. Jules almost laughed at the relief. It sounded performative in her own ears. Later, sitting on a bench where the lamps made small moons in the grass, Nina tried on explanations like coats that didn't fit. A moth, a seed pod in a draft, a toy on a string. All of them fell apart on the gliding and the silence and the way the smell obeyed its passing. Jules's mind kept hopping back to the moment before it appeared. The slap of a tiny body against skin. Kill a mosquito. Wake the forest. Cause and effect lined up too neatly. And that neatness felt like a warning not to say it out loud.